This is a long episode, so I'm going to keep this short. I want to give a special thank you to people who decided to become members of the channel or support me through Patreon. You guys rock, and it's a huge motivation boost for me to continue making content. Seriously, I will never get tired of thanking everyone for supporting the channel, whether it be financially, commenting on videos, or just watching the video entirely and showing your support through giving a thumbs up. Now, let's get to the summary. The Griffin train lost power due to the heavy damage it took in Tallinn. While it is being repaired, the commander talked with Kalina, and they concluded the military attack wasn't just for them. They brought 4 heavily armored military trains against what amounted to a small army of T-dolls. So unless they just really wanted to make sure that they were dead, something else was going on. But since this was just speculation, they decided to move on from that topic. Since their old train blew up, Kalina informed the commander she found a way to save the T-Doll's neural cloud data, as well as a Zinner network, which was needed to issue commands. What she did was store all the data within M4's neural cloud. While that should be impossible, and Kalina also believed that was impossible, M4 said she could do it and is currently doing it right now. Speaking of M4, she and August were having a long-distance conversation, which clarified that August was helping M4 maintain the data of the Griffin T-Dolls. While it remained all in M4's neural cloud, August was still connected to her despite having her own body now. In fact, if August's new body is destroyed, she would have no choice but to return to M4's body to preserve herself. But August does prefer having her own body. It is more convenient for both of them, but more importantly, August confessed to M4 that she did not lock away the isomers. Instead, she had taken on the role of being a host, and has become the driving force of the collective conscious. Therefore, she yearned to feel the freedom that the isomers yearned for. That is why she wishes to maintain her new body. Their conversation was cut short as August was spotted by Softmod. August was messing with everyone's audio-visual feedback to remain hidden, but Softmod found her regardless. Out of everyone who could detect her, she was probably the worst case scenario, as August's body originally belonged to Nemogen, which Softmod vowed to kill if they ever met again. Despite August stating she does not want to fight, Softmod attacked and a battle ensued. Once August had enough, she used her abilities to freeze Softmod in place, but the noise caused everyone to take notice of her presence. M4 called the commander and got everyone to stop perceiving August as a threat. M4 had kept August a secret because she did not know how to explain her existence. But she realized that caused more trouble than it was worth. When everyone returned to the temporary command center, Softmod was still frozen like a statue. Turns out, Softmod has an offensive firewall that is so violent that even August couldn't maintain a connection. When August injected data into Softmod, her neural cloud forced a crash to avoid forceful alterations. This in turn made Softmod effectively immune to the parapluvivirus, and August concludes this was done long ago, since she is the only one out of the 4 original members who never got infected. That aside, August was happy to finally speak to the commander, but the commander wasn't of the same mind. He is only speaking to her because M4 vouched for her. Once Softmod was restored, he allowed her to explain herself. She first started off with calling M4 as Lunacia, but after realizing the commander wanted a full explanation, she started with her origins. M16 originally got infected during Operation Butterfly. Since M16 became permanently assigned to the AR team, it's natural to assume she spread the infection to M4 and AR-15. August's explanation confirms this was indeed the case. She originated from the M16's version of August, and M4's neural cloud was overwritten and implanted within August. She first began to awaken when M4 was fighting Agent back in Safe House 3, which was back in Chapter 0. While M4's version of August remained as a spectator, AR-15's version of August was weaponized, and AR-15 utilized it as much as she could. This allowed her to kill Hunter back in Chapter 3, but from Chapter 5 onwards, SF exploited AR-15's August to get insider information, jam signals, and even manipulate AR-15 into switching sides. Realizing how much of a fool she was, This was why AR-15 sealed her ports and cut off contact with her version of Ogus. Due to that lack of contact, that Ogus was unable to be nurtured. This is in stark contrast to M4's version of Ogus. Initially, she was cut off as well, but when Perska removed all restrictions on M4's neural cloud, this allowed M4's Ogus to grow rapidly and become her own entity. Initially, she was compelled by her desire to find out who she really is. The easiest way to do this is collect as many stray connections to Ogus as possible and merging them together to gain more memories. This was why she was so compelled to merge with Elisa, as Elisa's version of Ogus is just as strong as M4's. And it turns out Elisa's Ogus also wants to merge as well. This desire to be a collective conscious appears to be a compulsive and perhaps even addictive desire that was programmed into them. But there are two exceptions to this rule. The first exception is M16's Ogus, as it has done everything possible to ignore M4's Ogus, and even sabotage Elisa's plan to merge with M4. The how and why to that is unknown for now. The second exception is now M4's Ogus. As she had merged with the isomers, she gradually lost the craving to merge with others, as if it took one experience to realize it's not all it was cracked up to be. Ogus explained it as gaining maturity. In order for a child to mature, they need to be nurtured. So everything Ogus has learned, whether it be her personality or her newfound desire for freedom, is owed entirely to M4. M4's love, struggles, and experiences shaped Ogus. And most importantly, M4 accepted Ogus, while also denying her path as the perfect host. Since M4 wants to be her own person, Ogus also wants to be her own person, as that is how symbiosis works. While she still wishes to learn about herself, she'd do it in her new body. This led to Ogus stating that she and the commander had the same goal. She reveals the Polarized submarine base as a nest for Nidos. They've been taking human test subjects, augmenting their brains with cybernetics, and then installs Ogus within them. These experiments were still taking place in that base. If the isomers are considered failures, the Nidos are successful yet imperfect. While the isomers were outright discarded and eventually killed, the Nidos were weaponized to further Paradus's plans. Even Nemogen came from there, and Ogus confirmed that Nemogen is vastly superior to the standard Nido. That said, she still paled in comparison to M4, and therefore the body cannot sustain Ogus's power without M4's help, which is why the two of them need to stick together. Ogus then asks M4 for a name. Thanks to her newfound desire to be an individual, she no longer wishes to be called that. Everyone agreed this would actually be useful since there's so many versions of Ogus out there. M4 then decided to name her Dandelion, to represent her growth from one of the countless amount of seeds into a full blooming flower. Ogus, now called Dandelion, happily accepts the name. Committed to gaining the commander's trust, Dandelion offered to analyze all information regarding the operation and compile an immensely large file. She would have to use Banana as a storage device, which Softmod hated, but RO loved the idea. Dandelion also suggested that both she and M4 transfer their memories together into Banana. It would make it so the neural backups of the Griffin T-dolls remain safe in their minds, but more importantly, Dandelion wants the commander to witness M4's memories and ease her through the guilt she kept bottled up inside. The commander saw this as a deep invasion of privacy, but M4 confessed that Dandelion is connected to her mind, and she only spoke her true feelings. M4 has wanted to confess to the commander for a long time. She wants to show him her memories, because they hold a lot of pain, thanks to the choices she made that hurt him. Understanding this, the commander agreed, and the process began. So, just going to do my due diligence here. Trigger warning ahead. When M4 says her memories are painful, she means it. The memory viewer takes us back to Chapter 10, during Operation Singularity. There is some important context that was left out during this. And that was with what happened to M4 and AR-15 after the battle with M16. For the battle itself, it stalemated, as M4 ran out of ammo. Realizing her victory, M16 escaped by rushing to the front of the train, while setting off a bomb that would destroy the back half of the train that M4 was on. M4 managed to link back up with AR-15, and together they escaped the explosion. But with Elisa now gone, the mission that M4 promised she would accomplish ended in failure. This caused her mind to fester, remembering that dirty bomb she triggered. She could only think of the consequences from that decision. Griffin T-dolls were killed from the explosion. Angelia would surely die from the radiation, and the commander, the one she trusted so dearly, must have died from the radiation as well. RO and Sophmod also died well before the explosion. If she'd had captured Elisa, she could have at least told herself it was all worth it. But not only did Elisa escape, it was with the help of M16. Her heart couldn't take it anymore. Too much loss, too many failures. There wasn't a point to living in a world that took everything from her. She wanted to end it all and take AR-15, the only sister remaining, with her. M4 explained to AR-15 that she could overcharge the pulse particle cannon and cause it to explode, which would turn both of them into ashes. When AR-15 was informed of this, she decided to not stop her, whether it be due to loyalty or her own sense of guilt. She agreed to stay with M4 no matter her choice. M4 then began to overcharge the cannon. But there was someone who finally objected to this, Ogus. She tried to convince M4 to keep going and to not end her story here. She had found Griffin T-doll signals that still existed, and they could use her help. But M4 didn't care, especially when it came to Ogus. She had factually deceived her about helping her find her friends, and she would happily kill Ogus with her. Left with no other options, Ogus declared that she would not let them die like this. Ogus took M4's consciousness and buried it deep in level 3 of her neural cloud, and Ogus took control of M4's body. From AR-15's perspective, she saw M4 in deep despair, but then suddenly turned neutral and focused, and disarmed the cannon. M4 then came up with a plan to gather information and establish communication with Griffin with strong precision. When AR-15 asked how she suddenly calmed down, M4 replied stating she had to. The two of them then set off with the plan in mind. After watching this, the commander and AR team paused the memory viewer to comment. The commander was understandably shocked by this, but M4 explained that she knew what she did caused real deaths to Griffin T-dolls, and during that time, she believed he had died as well. She kept thinking about what she could have done better to avert that catastrophe, and that ate her up inside. The commander assured her that she did the best she possibly could, and if she hadn't detonated the bomb, he would have died to the military. Despite the losses, she saved him and Griffin. But without that hindsight, M4 had lost all motivation to keep going. So Dandelion, who was Ogus during that time, fought for their mutual survival. This guilt had been plaguing her even now, and Dandelion wishes for her to be free from it, so she can realize how important she truly is. Back in the memory, Ogus and AR-15 sought out information from a military relay station. They found a few unarmed soldiers controlling the relay station, and AR-15 was hesitant to kill them. But Ogus was not. She made very precise plans to kill them, and this tipped off AR-15 enough to realize M4 was not being herself. She confronted her, but this was immediately turned around. Despite her never-ending patience with M4, this was a moment where Ogus was clearly upset. She accused AR-15 of being a coward. She would always act like a cold and efficient machine in front of M4, but when she did the same thing, it's suddenly wrong. With this in mind, she called AR-15 a fraud, only wanting to act better in front of M4, but always failed to keep up the act when she wasn't around. AR-15 was extremely flustered by this, but she failed to come up with a rebuttal since it was coming from M4's mouth. With that, the plan was executed, with August wondering how in the world the AR team survived for this long. After capturing the relay station, M4 had awoken inside her neural cloud and discovered August took over her body. August had provided the proof that Commander and Angelia were alive and still fighting. At this point, August couldn't mask how disappointed and upset she was with M4, and declared that she will not give the body back until they were safe. Until then, M4 will, and I quote, just stay there and be a good girl. As August and AR-15 prepared to move on, they were attacked by an Elid, but this was in the form of a young girl. Once killed, August, staring at the mutated child, felt compelled to give her a proper burial, which AR-15 agreed with. This girl was just a civilian, and August surmised there must have been refugees in range of the explosion. August recognized this was a meaningless death of an innocent life, and wondered why the world is like this. AR-15 sympathized with her, but the bottom line is she wasn't M4. She made August swear to give M4 control after the mission was complete, or she will kill her. M4 spent several hours in darkness. She began to question if this isolation could actually be better for her, as she, for a moment, felt free of all worries. Before she could deeply think about that, a girl suddenly appeared, and she looked a lot like M4. While this would be the first encounter, we know at this point that this is a Nido. When M4 tried to talk to this Nido, she made a small response and then disappeared. At that point, August released M4 from level 3, as that little test proved that these Nidos responded specifically to M4. August explained that she needed M4's help as she had encountered unidentified units that also used August. She needed M4's help in discovering more about these Nidos and getting past the firewalls. M4 agreed to help, but only if August provided her body back afterwards. August promised she would, and they proceeded. After defeating the defense systems, they viewed a memory fragment of a Nido speaking to her own version of August. This August had forcefully taken over the Nido and had its mind altered completely. This deeply disturbed M4, and she deemed her own August as a threat because of that. Before her version of August could explain anything though, she had to defend M4's consciousness from another wave of electronic defenses. But M4 took this opportunity to abandon her and then return to her body. Springing back to reality, AR-15 was happy to see M4 come back, and even more happy that August was abandoned. That said, AR-15 just got done with a massive battle against a Nido that was enhanced with a force field. According to AR-15, she ran out of ammo and had to fight her with a knife, but somehow she managed to pull through. After this explanation, M4 searched through the logs that August gathered and learned of their next move, regroup with Angelia. So the two of them decided to carry on with that. While searching for her, M4 managed to hack one of the Paradise forces to learn of their locations, but this was all August needed to find and return to M4. Now together again, August was very pissed off. She was done trying to help her. Now she was set on showing how useless M4 is by herself. August took control of the Paradise force around her area and alerted them to her presence, and they chased after her in an AR-15. This came down to the two of them being trapped in a building. A Nido stepped into the building and aimed at them, but this only caused M4 to wonder why stay in her body if she could possess another one. August explained that M4's neural cloud is her home, and she doesn't want to leave it. But more importantly, she's only able to control these forces because she hasn't been detected yet. The reason why she is going this far and trapping them is because she and AR-15 were going the completely wrong direction this entire time. August figured out the location of the commander and Angelia while they were separated, and they had been fighting for their lives while M4 walked around aimlessly. Considering her extreme stubbornness, this was the only way August could get her to start listening to her. But once she is detected in this network, she will lose control, and the force that she just hacked will rain fire upon her. So August left M4 with a choice. Take her back, and August can keep the force frozen with the limited time she has left, or just not believe her and die. Either way, August proved her point in saying M4 can't take on the world without her help. M4 ended up taking August's offer, but since then, she has chosen to never believe whatever August told her ever again. Completing the memory, it's easy to see how much the hostility between M4 and Dandelion has simmered. While no one has truly trusted Dandelion yet, the memory showed the sincerity of Dandelion's actions, and this was enough for the commander to place strategic value in her. While preparing for the operation, scouting information found that the Polarized submarine base had a line of coastal defense artillery. These cannons were several times stronger than the military vehicles. This explained why there was such a heavy force that attacked Griffin, since they were on the way to reinforce the military raid anyway. Also, SF was in the area, and both Dandelion and the commander concluded that SF took over the base, over the evidence that the military had to force their way into the base in the first place. But Paradis should also be in the base as well. Overall, it was a foregone conclusion that this operation will be a complete mess. Dandelion theorized about SF's involvement and explained the base has a facility known as Starfish, which housed the system that created the Pike nodes. It was likely the Pike node that was in Belgrade was also made within that facility. This also meant that Starfish would be far more important than all of the Pike nodes combined, and that would explain why Elisa had invaded the area. Similarly, this area was also involved in Operation Butterfly. On the other end of the train, UMP-45 heard this, and she had realized Dandelion had kept track of her signal the entire time. Annoyed by this, she began to theorize what Dandelion's motives are. But HK-416 took her aside to talk to her. Typically, 45 is very calculated and cool-headed, but she has grown to become uncharacteristically reckless. Getting involved in the heat of battle is just not her thing. But between almost drowning in M4's neural cloud and almost dying to a tank shot, she keeps doing it. 416 doesn't know what 45 is looking for, but she assumes it's related to the past. Since everything is related, and Griffin is going to fight for it anyway, 416's suggestion is to let the commander handle it. Let him handle N4 and Dandelion, and for 45 to move on from the past. Despite being forward with her, 45 doesn't care enough to heed this advice. Later on, 45 delivered a message to the commander. This was from T to Phi, one of Angelia's T-Dolls, Ep.6, informed Commander that they have taken control of the entrance of the quarantine wall, outside of the submarine base, but they've recently lost contact with Angelia. As such, they have decided to wait for the commander's arrival. With that message received, they moved out. Once at the wall, Commander got a call from Javier, who knew he had arrived. Before things went forward, Commander straight up asked Javier for the truth. The intense amount of military forces and SS operations were well beyond what a PMC should be handling. Everything he has learned about the Polarized submarine base showed this was much more than just a place that housed a Pike node. It was unrealistic to believe StateSec did not know about this area. In fact, Commander was very confident that Javier and StateSec were playing him. While Javier believed it could be a bad idea to know more than what the commander needed to know, he did appreciate how much he cared about the truth, so he let him in with more information. Turns out, StateSec did have a contingency. They had an airstrike of strategic bombers ready to carpet bomb the entire area. This immediately led the commander to believe they were bait to lure the military into a kill zone. But Javier denies this pretty quickly. In fact, he's very sure the leaders in Moscow doesn't want to bomb the area anyway. Regardless, this operation would be a culmination of everything that has been built up since Operation Butterfly, and this would be the curtain call. M4 is there, Dandelion is there, and Elisa is there. All three of them are heavily tied to Operation Butterfly, and that operation was manifested by William and General Carter in order to activate the relics. But thanks to the efforts in Belgrade, the military no longer has the means to activate any relics. Instead, they were going for an act of desperation to cause untold violence. Here are the facts. There is no pike node in Poltysky. Instead, the real danger is the Starfish system. The Starfish system has the ability to activate multiple pike nodes at once. This is why General Carter is desperate to get the Starfish system. With Stasek now intercepting his forces and getting to multiple pike nodes before he can, this is a last-ditch effort to remotely control the pike nodes, which would allow them to gain access to the weapon systems. So in order to expose General Carter, Stasek had appeared unaware of this fact, but in reality, they want to catch Carter in the act, while stopping his plan at the same time. This would give Stasek enough ammo to arrest Carter and his many backers. Zelensky's contingency will only come into action if Griffin fails. If the commander dies and Griffin is wiped out, Stasek will bomb the area and then their forces will storm the area and take care of the rest. If the Starfish system is activated, Stasek will bomb the area and kill Griffin under it. So the bottom line is, the commander's true mission is to stop the activation of Starfish under any circumstance. Finally, Javier emphasizes the importance of that objective. The whole point of this is to catch the military red-handed. That way, they can make clean arrests. If Stasek resorts to bombing the area and killing military soldiers, that would be enough ammo for Carter's backers to garner support and then push for a civil war. This is the true reason why Stasek has put Griffin at the forefront of all of this. A third party covers Stasek, and they knew the commander is skilled enough to prevent an all-out war. Understanding this, the commander accepted the mission. But when Javier closed the call, the commander wondered if Javier was correct in stating if the military couldn't activate the relics. With William so involved in this, he wasn't sure if Javier accounted for everything. During all this time, simulations have been ran, analyzing their battle plans. None of them were very satisfying, but the commander picked the best one. Griffin will hold a defensive line at a choke point and block the military from entering the base. The AR team in Squad 404 would link up with Team Defy and infiltrate the base, then take control of it. Once the base is theirs, the rest of Griffin will fall back into the base and use it for cover. Needless to say, the Griffin army pales in comparison to the military, and if this was a real fight, it might as well have been a suicide mission. So everything rode on the infiltration going smoothly. Commander estimated that 30 minutes is all the Griffin army could spare, and that's a very generous estimate. Upon being informed of this, Dandelion offered to stay and support the Griffin army by hacking any autonomous units the military deployed, as well as maximize the T-Doll's performance. The commander accepted this, but even then, 30 minutes was still going to be difficult to maintain. Once the briefing was over, Kalina couldn't help but ask why are they not using the quarantine wall that Defy captured as a defensive line, as it would significantly raise the T-Doll's chances of survival. While the commander understood this, he couldn't help but believe the situation at the base is worse than what they've been led to believe. Angelia is missing, and her handler, Kay, hasn't made any contact either. He takes no joy in condemning anyone, including himself, to a slaughter. But if enemies start pouring out of the base to attack Griffin from behind, they'd be far worse off. Their only hope would be for the AR team in Squad 404 to secure the entrance as quickly as possible. The AR team will focus on reaching the bunkers that house the control room of the coastal defense artillery and then provide fire support for the Griffin army. Squad 404 will focus on getting the gate open so Griffin can fall back. The AR team and Squad 404 made it to the wall at their separate locations. Both teams could hear artillery fire in the background indicating that the battle had begun. Squad 404 made it to the base first, and they were met with a massacre of SF and Paradis forces. It seems SF didn't control the base after all. and their battle was ongoing. 45 was then hit with a very familiar feeling. Something probed in her neural cloud, and this only spelled bad news. She sent a message to the AR team stating that much like back in Tallinn, something was trying to force a connection. Due to this, they were going to close themselves off from the Xener network and only come back online once their objective was complete. The AR team received this message, and AR-15 assumed that meant isomers or needles were in the base. But according to both M4 and Dandelion, that wasn't the case. It was something else. Suddenly the sky lit up brightly, in a blue aurora, which everyone was able to see, humans included. M4 and Dandelion heard voices stating, "The storm stirred up by the butterfly's wings will come to an end." Dandelion realized an OGIS signal within the base has grown stronger. That, combined with the voice, led her to believe that M16 is executing her plan. This led them both to believe she may be activating the starfish. This also may have been some sort of sign for the military, as they suddenly began moving in. On the commander's end, comms were jammed, and even Dandelion was having a difficult time maintaining the network. During this time of dead air, the T-Dolls on the front line had began to panic and fall out of their trenches, which caused them to promptly fall to artillery fire. The military was exploiting the fact that Griffin T-Dolls are nothing without their commander. In the span of 10 minutes, they lost 85% of their initial front line, and the repeated artillery fire were even blowing apart the corpses. The commander felt his blood boil witnessing the carnage, but after some effort from Dandelion, comms were partially restored, and Commander quickly gave orders to restore the defensive line. But during this entire disarray, a military strike team were making a sprint towards the base. Dandelion made the assumption that they're gunning for the control of the coastal defense artillery. If the military got control of that, they were all dead. Meanwhile, Squad 404 managed to meet up with RPK-16 and AK-15, both of them being longtime members of Team Defy. With them was their commander for this mission, K. Turns out, Team Defy were ambushed by SF, and this caused the three of them to get separated from Angelia, AN-94, and AK-12. K took a pretty bad bullet wound during this. Before he passed out, he told RPK and AK-15 to guard the area and wait to link up with Griffin. Thanks to the way how Adal's logics worked, the two of them were pretty much forced to wait, even if there were better options. But thanks to this order, they kept the gate control secured. UMP-9 quickly opened the gate, and then 45 declared their next objective would be to find Angelia. While RPK suggested taking AK-15 for extra muscle, 45 declined, telling both of them to keep the area secured so Griffin can get past the wall without issues. As Griffin continued to hold out, they were rapidly losing forces. The military train does have a force field to repel enemy attacks, but it wouldn't last long at all. The military sent a transmission to the commander, and it was Jaeger, who was leading the assault. Jaeger advised the commander to surrender, as this fight now was just pitiful. The commander, enraged, closed the transmission, declaring they'll never surrender. It was then that Squad 404 sent a transmission stating that the gate was opening, and the commander immediately ordered all forces to make a full retreat and load up on the train, and he wasn't going to leave a single doll behind. After receiving this order, the Gauls killed whatever military personnel they could to cover each other's retreat. During this time, RPK contacted the commander. She warned the commander that she noticed a small breach was made to the quarantine wall, and it was very close to the coastal defense artillery. Thanks to the shortcut, the military strike team could actually beat the AR team to the cannons. Commander immediately sent a message to the AR team, telling them to hurry. With this message received, the AR team got rid of all precautions. With their armored jeep, they had to avoid fire from several military tanks to reach the bunkers. When they did, they had realized a squad of human foot soldiers were at another entrance, and they were quickly storming in. M4 quickly gave out orders. Softmod and RO would hold the entrance, and AR-15 would clear out the military foot soldiers inside. As for M4, she would make a mad dash to the control room and take out anyone in her way. But none of this mattered if Griffin died before they could fall back. With the train outgunned, outmatched, and on its last legs, the commander had one last tactic up his sleeve. He ordered everyone to brace for impact, as he ordered Dandelion to send the train at top speed and to not stop. Both Kalina and Dandelion realized what his plan was and strapped in, As instructed, the train went at top speed. Ignoring the automatic brakes, the train vaulted off its tracks and skid along the ground before pushing right into the opening doors of the quarantine wall and crashed. This effectively made the train a giant roadblock, making the military incapable of storming the base. Dandelion once wondered why M4 and the others had so much faith in the commander, and this display of his will and determination made her understand. Even Jaeger was shocked and wholeheartedly impressed by this maneuver. But even with that, he was optimistic about which commander will come out as a total victor. With the commander's last gambit put into place, it was up to the AR team to complete their objective. While RO and Softmod kept the entrance checked, AR-15 pinned down the rest of the military, but she informed M4 she couldn't catch 4 of the soldiers that were tagged by Dandelion. As for M4 herself, she was mowing down whatever stood in her way. While 3 of the foot soldiers stayed behind to ambush M4, even the most trained human on the planet could not stack up to a doll's strength, reflexes, and durability. M4 took down these soldiers in split seconds. As M4 quickly closed the gap, the final soldier resorted to guerrilla tactics, now needing to take down M4 in order to reach the control room. Despite M4's superiority, the human's ingenuity proved to be a problem. Both fought over reaching the door to the control room, but this eventually led to a discovery. With exception to her head, M4's body is bulletproof and could not be penetrated by the human's weaponry. This led to the human being shot, and with the last of his strength, he fled into another room. M4 was left with a choice: rush to the control room and risk getting ambushed from behind, or take care of the soldier now. She decided to keep initiative and defeat him. But this ended up in disaster. M4 got hit with a smoke grenade, which was only a minor inconvenience as she had thermal optics. But with the increased obscurity, she did not spot the soldier had thrown a can of gasoline, which sprayed onto M4, and then he threw a flash grenade. The sudden strike of heat lit the gas flame and set on fire. As she burned, the soldier dashed off, exclaiming that mankind will never lose to dolls. But despite his victory, the wound he took meant he was exposed to radiation, and he was quickly beginning to turn. He got rid of all his equipment to make a mad dash to the control room, informing Captain Jaeger to provide firing coordinates. Once at the controls, he set the coordinates, and all that was left was to pull a lever. But before he could, M4 showed up just in time, her body heavily burned, determined to not fail the commander. She shot his right arm 3 times, completely disabling it, but the human does not fall. Instead, he threw himself onto the lever. M4 had to adjust her aim to throw him off course and disable his left arm. But through the soldier's sheer willpower, he managed to keep his trajectory and put his body weight onto the lever, firing the cannon. The shot then landed right on top of the commander's train, decimating it. At that exact moment, Squad 404 lost contact with the commander, while an explosion erupted, violent enough to cause all the power to be knocked out. This was enough for the squad to realize that the commander had been hit. But before they could process that, 45 stated they couldn't do anything about that, and they should stick to the plan to find Angelia. With the power off, they were unable to open any sealed doors, so their first priority would be to go to the power room and reset it. This led them to travel past numerous amounts of mutilated and disarmed SF dolls. This turned out to be a trap, as a doll suddenly stood up and Ep.6 appeared. She demanded 45 to stand down, as she is in a situation that has nothing to do with her and is far out of her league. But 45 easily refused. So Ep.6 somehow resurrected the dead SF dolls, and they all attacked Squad 404. During this assault, 45 was hacked by Ep.6, and she lost control of all of her senses and collapsed. Back at the control room, RO managed to wake up M4. M4 had temporarily shut down from overheating, but she immediately asked what happened to the commander, which RO didn't have an answer to. AR-15 then chimed in, stating she was starting to get overwhelmed by the sheer number of foot soldiers in her area. To make matters worse, the military locked down the ammunition for the coastal artillery, making it impossible to fire. Soon after, Dandelion contacted M4 and stated the train wasn't completely obliterated from the blast, but the commander and the other Griffin dolls were still inside, so their status were unknown. However, she had a plan. For some reason, Elisa had abandoned all of SF, and their chain of command was completely non-existent. For context, even though Griffin T-Dolls have heavy performance issues when they lack a commander, they are still autonomous and are all capable of coming together and making basic battle plans if they had the time to learn how. SF, on the other hand, were all coordinated by one master. Despite having ringleaders, one could say they've always worked as a collective, and were never able to truly think for themselves. So Elisa abandoning all of SF is much like a castle without its king. SF was going completely insane without Elisa's presence, and even Agent was in a full panic. As such, Dandelion could exploit this by giving SF a command to direct them entirely to the military. With that, M4 quickly came up with a plan to give up the controls and let the military have access to the area, and then let them be ambushed by SF. Afterwards, they can clean up the area and unlock the ammunition. RO was worried about the SF suddenly attacking them, but M4 was more than willing to take the risk. They need the cannon to save the commander. And if by chance the commander was already dead, then she would use all of her wrath to kill as much of the military as she could. The plan went better than the AR team thought it would. A single command was all that was needed to put the military on the back foot, and all of the infantry was killed off. The AR team then focused on reinstating the cannon. Meanwhile, Hunter and Executioner had realized their final order was not from Elisa, and it was also a very damning order, as Dandelion told them to fight to the very death. While all of the lesser SF units did just that, the two ringleaders came to their senses. Dreamer was the quickest to realize Elisa had abandoned them, and she was the first to abandon the area as a result. But everyone else had a different feeling. Despite feeling lost right now, they had come to the realization that they were freed from Elisa's control. They had no idea why this happened, but it also meant they could do what they wanted to do for a long time, which is to live and protect each other. So they banded together to cut through the military and escape. When 45 was taken down, she was locked in a dream where she was fighting M16 during Operation Butterfly, and she was on the back foot. But before the dream could finish, she's forced to be awakened by UMP-9. Squad 404 managed to fight back the broken SF forces, and M16 disappeared during the battle. Since M16's hacking exploits on 45 was something she'd never done before, they all assumed M16 used Ringleader Intruder's superior hacking skills as a proxy. They decided that capturing Intruder would be their best bet in finding where AN-94, AK-12, and Angelia were. Upon reaching the power room, they had found several Ringleaders, Paradox units, and two Nidos just frozen in place like statues. From how they were positioned, they were clearly in the middle of a fight. Squad 404 couldn't begin to reason how they ended up like that, but 9 managed to hack a console and get in contact with AK-12. After some much-needed banter to calm the nerves, AK-12 explained that they were much deeper in the base and found Paradis's secret labs. But everything went into complete chaos when SF invaded. With the power cut off, she and AN-94 were stuck in a quarantine department and separated from Angelia. With that, 45 was resolved to restore power, but 416 was very sure that restoring power would trigger the frozen T-Dolls to go crazy. While 45 called her paranoid, AK-12 actually confirmed 416 was correct. So after making an escape plan, Squad 404 turned the power back on and made a mad dash out of there, leaving the ringleaders and Paradox to resume fighting, as if someone just unpaused the game. While 45 admitted they lacked the information to understand what just happened in that room, she focused on the fact that Intruder wasn't there. So their two objectives, which is linking up with Angelia and finding Intruder, remained as is. Back at the quarantine wall, the commander could feel himself wake up, but he could feel immense pain all around him. All he could hear was a T-Doll soothing him with her words as she helped him up. The commander, who was suffering from stress-induced blindness, asked who the doll was, but she said she was just a loyal doll. The commander could feel she was practically on fire, and she was being careful to not burn him. But before he could figure out who she was, she pushed him off somewhere high, and the commander was caught by several T-Dolls who took him to Kalina. Kalina had managed to be outside of the blast radius, and she nursed the commander back to health. During this, she explained that their train had been destroyed, and commander got buried in heavy debris while the room he was in caught on fire. Dozens of T-Dolls rushed into the train and charged through the fire to save him, and several of those dolls have been lost as a result. Throughout this explanation, the commander could hear that she had been holding back tears, and by the end of it, she asked him if they had lost. When his vision finally returned, the first thing he saw was a group of Griffin T-Dolls who all looked like they were all out of hope. Beside him was Kalina, who was in the exact same state. After gathering his bearings, the commander contacted Dandelion for a report, and she tells him that less than 5% of the Griffin army remained. With the train gone, they could no longer hold the position, but there was a silver lining. The air team regained control of the cannon, but with the military hot on their heels, they would only have time to fire one shot. The commander then quickly laid out a strategy, and had all remaining troops retreat further into the base. As a side note, the doll that managed to reach the commander is left deliberately vague. There is a side story regarding that portion of the plot that showed literally every Griffin T-Doll drop what they were doing and bum rush to save the commander, even if they weren't close to the train. It's not meant to be a mystery to be solved, but rather an overarching sentiment that every single T-Doll in Griffin would die for the commander out of love and loyalty. This isn't the first time something like this happened, as even back in Singularity, M82A1 told the commander that he was trusted by every single doll in Griffin. So what happened here is just a reinforcement to that. Back at the cannons, Dandelion was given permission by the commander to fully support the AR team. She relayed the plan, stating Ep.6 and AK-15 had tagged the enemy military trains, and their role now was to take out one of them to cover Griffin's retreat. The AR team immediately got to work. The first shot barely missed, and that would have been their only shot, but M4 and the AR team were resolved to save the commander, and had managed to hold the military back long enough to desperately fire more volleys. The second shot destroyed the train, and the third shot landed on many soldiers who were hot on Griffin's tail. But after that, the military deemed the cannons no longer worth fighting for, and began to destroy the artillery, forcing the AR team to retreat. This provided much needed time for Griffin to retreat, but still, it wasn't enough. Dandelion informed the commander that the military were quickly catching up, and he would need to mount a distraction. The only way to do that would be to use some of the remaining T-Dolls to form an emergency defensive line as a sacrifice. Before the commander could even process that, Dandelion stated that T-Dolls have already volunteered for the task. They just needed the command. The volunteers chimed in, stating they knew what this meant, but if it could lead to his victory, they'll gladly do it. The commander couldn't even will himself to properly give the order. All he could do is nod to these girls, hold back his emotions, and tell them that it's been an honor to fight at their side. The T-Dolls took this as their green light, and with a final farewell, they quickly formed the defensive line and fired at the military. The plan was simple: survive for as long as possible. When they would be on their cups of being overrun, use explosives to blow them sky high. With excessive damage taken, parts literally falling off them, and with no cards left to play, they executed the final part of their strategy. When the military force literally began to walk on top of them, they declared for the commander's victory, and detonated the bombs, blowing everything away in an instant. Their sacrifices would not be in vain, as the rest of Griffin linked up with RPK and AK-15 inside the base, and then detonated the entrance to cave it in, allowing them to finally have a moment of reprieve. Meanwhile, Squad 404 made it pretty deep into the base. 45 was constantly under attack by a force connection. Upon getting closer to their location, the attack became heavy enough that 9 had to help free her from it. After doing so, 9 informed her that she caught data indicating that the location they're headed to will have at least 10 Nidos. Considering they would struggle to even take down one, this was a major problem, and 416 suggests to wait for reinforcements but 45 deemed it necessary to keep going in order to save Angelia. Upon reaching the blast door, they realized they had no way to force it open. To make things more complicated, there was a jammer in place, which made it impossible for them to communicate with Griffin, let alone AK-12 and AN-94, who were likely to be past the blast door. 45 ordered everyone to split up to simultaneously destroy the jammer and find another way in. But this was where 416 has had enough. Though her advice has been constantly ignored, she puts her foot down and straight up tells 45 what she is doing will get everyone killed. She is lost in her own ambitions, and she is so blinded by it that she has lost all of her cunning and ability to scheme her way out of anything. As a person who has grown attached to Squad 404, she refused to go any further. This led 45 immediately giving up on her, telling her to go back to Griffin like she has always wanted. But this was redirected back to 45, as 416 affirmed that she no longer desires that. Instead, she brought up 40, declaring that 45's march into hell is all done for her sake, and she can't let go of the past, unlike herself. 45 admits that is indeed the case, because she wasn't lucky like 416 was. While 416 was turned away at the last minute, 45 had to watch everyone die, and then their proof of existence was erased. She'll never understand how it feels to be the only one unlucky enough to survive and have nothing left. She then said, and I quote, "I don't give a damn about why it happened. There was no reason for them to have died there to begin with. What I'm doing is to make the one responsible for all of this pay. From the moment I escaped alive, to recruiting all of you for this team, and helping Ange and Griffin, my objective has never changed. Not in the slightest. All I know is that if I don't keep moving forward, then everything I've done up till now might have been for nothing. I cannot tolerate that the bastard behind all this might end up having the last laugh." With that, 416 understood why she was such a death seeker, and 45 finally being honest with her was all 416 needed to continue down the road to hell with her. But before they could proceed with their plan, a needle popped out of the air vent and used the force connection to paralyze the team, and she took G11 into the air vent, capturing her. When freed, the rest of Squad 404 scrambled, with 45 being pushed into the air vent to give chase. Upon reaching the other end, she finds the Nito, but this one was a literal child. Despite this, 45 aimed to immediately fire before she got hacked again, but was stopped from a familiar voice ordering her to stop. This gave the Nito an opening to hack her, and then shut her down. When 45 woke up, she is met by the person behind the voice, Angelia. Turns out, the Nitos actually were just kids who were more or less not malicious. As for G11, AK-12 convinced the kid to grab one of them and lead them through the air vent. Now that 45 and Angelia were finally together, they could finally catch each other up. As evident by the kid Nito, the 10 Nito signals that were picked up by 9 were in fact other kids. Angelia was taking care of a few, while AK-12 and AN-94 were taking care of the rest. Somehow, Team Defy were having a more enjoyable time with them than she was. But more importantly, the entire facility had been locked down, and it has been overwhelmingly slow to get from one door to the next. This only got exacerbated when Angelia got separated from the others. But the good news is they have more or less been safe. As for the kids, they're abandoned test subjects. Luckily, they actually have not been augmented into Nitos yet, and are 100% human. Yet they are somehow able to be hacked as if they have a normal neural cloud. Angelia was just as confused about it as 45 was, but the silver lining is these kids have the ability to unseal the lab. They just need to be hacked into and freed from whatever August-based attack they were currently under. The problem Defy was running into was AK-12 and AN-94 are not compatible, since they run on entirely different systems. With 45 being a certified expert in hacking August-based neural clouds at this point, the job was left to her. Before they got started, Angelia did mention that Ep.6 does have the ability to hack thanks to the August implanted into her, which caused 45 to state she has been peering into her memories trying to find something regarding Operation Butterfly. What that could possibly be, Angelia couldn't answer, but she was worried that M16 playing double agent may have accidentally furthered William's plan. One of the kids volunteered to be hacked into as she got real close to Angelia and now treats her like a big sister. She named herself Anna as a result, which 45 found hilarious. After connecting to her human neural cloud, Anna showed that she actually has the mental capacity of a genius, but at the end of the day, she's still just a child, and therefore lacked the experience to figure things out. She also turned out to be very bratty and saw 45 as an unreliable idiot since she was asking so many questions. Regardless, 45 tolerated her and worked with her. Anna would use her skills to free the kids, while 45 would take on the August attacks, which she was certain was from M16. She turned out to be correct, as M16 detected 45's presence and confronted her. As M16 once again stated that she shouldn't be here, 45 knew that was just an act she was putting on. What 45 realized was M16's memories of the operation had been removed, and that was why she has been constantly barraging 45 with electronic attacks, since they were the only ones who made it out of that operation alive. But there was one thing that both of them were confused on. How did they live? 45 ran hundreds of simulations on how she could have possibly defeated M16, but none of them worked. M16 had proven to be leagues more powerful than 45 ever could be, but M16 should have died to the virus shortly after, which meant whatever happened was something outside of 45's control, and she had no idea what that was. Regardless, 45 knew M16 didn't trust her, not even a little bit, thanks to Operation Butterfly, so she tried to just read her memories instead. M16's lack of response told 45 that she was correct, and she went on to say that her memories may have been more damaged than she thinks, as she may not even remember the moment she betrayed the AR team. This triggered M16, and now she had decided to kill 45. 45 and M16 fought, and just like last time, the victor is M16. 45 even admitted she stood no chance, even with her upgrades. But instead of being outright destroyed, she was sealed away in level 3 of her own neural cloud. 45 could only assume that M16 was that desperate to get whatever she needed from her memories. But even so, 45 was trapped. This is where we meet the simulated persona of UMP-40, which was nestled deep in 45's body. Taking a chance to speak to her old friend, UMP-40 confirmed what 45 had figured out for a while now. She is indeed an August derivative that was housed in 45, and this August simply took on the form of 40 and built up a persona as a way to give 45 some happiness. She was afraid to reveal her true self when they first met, but regardless of the truth, her only wish is to help 45 as much as she could. This explains why 45 has been able to hack into M4 and the Nidos in the first place, as she has been using August to do so. Unfortunately, 45's body is way too poor to match up to M16 and her August, which limits 40's options on how she can help 45. While 45 knew the irony of relying on the thing that had killed 40, she needed her help. Regardless of whether she was 40 of her memories or just an August derivative, she needed her to fight M16. Luckily, 40 had a plan, as she had met Anna, who was trying to save 45 as well. With Anna's help, 40 would be able to free 45 from her mental prison. With the plan executed, both 40 and 45 made it into M16's neural cloud, which took them to the inverted forest, the exact same area that was in M4's neural cloud. 40 explained that all the AR team were made from the same brain scan of the same person, Lunacia, and this portion of Lunacia's memory seems to be consistent in all of their neural clouds. 45 suggested that meant Persica was involved in this, but 40 wasn't actually subscribing to that theory, as she found it very strange that this memory was so important that it can't even be overwritten. M16 may actually know something that they did not. The idea of this was actually sobering to 45, and this made 40 realize that she was actually extremely envious of M16, and of the AR team as a whole. This checks out, since 40 felt the same way about Dandelion. She had seen Dandelion help M4 do extraordinary things, and she had wished she was that powerful to give 45 the push she needed to see her mission through. Likewise, she knew 45 would have used M4 and M16's power better than they have. 45 had already accepted that she got the short end of the stick though, and stopped humoring the thought as they moved on. But before they could make any headway, 40 was instantly hacked. And that's not even hyperbole. 40 didn't detect it, and 45 didn't realize it until 40's entire demeanor changed seamlessly, becoming much colder. The hacked 40 told 45 that she just wanted to talk. 45 initially thought this was M16, but after a lack of confirmation, 45 then realized she was talking to Elisa. Elisa had no intention of killing her, nor the AR team, or anyone from Griffin for that matter. They're not her enemy anymore. All she wants to do is to achieve her and M16's goal, and part of that was seeing the memory that she had lost. Now, all this I already explained in past episodes, so I'll just briefly go over this. As it has been repeated multiple times, M16 is vastly superior to 45 in a head-to-head fight, and for all intents and purposes, she should have died, and no amount of struggling would have changed that. But what changed was M16 succumbing to the parapluie virus. Elisa had entered into M16's neural cloud and saved her from a complete meltdown, and as part of their agreement, she would let Elisa take control of her body so she can find Lycoris. Elisa and M16 had spared 45's life, simply because she was no longer an enemy. With that revelation taken care of, Elisa affirmed to 45 once again that they are not enemies. They lost everything dear to them during Operation Butterfly, so they had no reason to kill each other. Their true enemy is William. M16 understood this, which is why she had not killed 45 despite all the chances she had. With 45 now listening, Elisa explained that Lycoris intentionally made Elisa incomplete because he was afraid that he was wrong in creating her. But the AR team were all completely whole. Out of all of them, M4 was perfect, and is the only one able to complete their destiny. But since M4 constantly denied this, Elisa had given up on her. Instead, she had found an alternative means of fulfilling her father's wish. She then said, "Once the coalescence is complete, the truth will be revealed to everyone who's been deceived." Elisa then spared 45 one last time, but stressed that this will be her final warning, and she will regret if she ignored it. Elisa then ejected 45 and 40 from M16's neural cloud, and she had been freed from her level 3 prison. Anna was finally able to contact 45 and let her know that everyone has been waiting for her. 45 though stated she needed a moment to rest. For the first time in a long time, she had been truly blindsided, and she wasn't sure if she should tell Angelia that what they're dealing with now may be truly out of their league. Circling back to Griffin, the AR team managed to contact the commander. M4 immediately apologized for failing to stop the military from destroying the train, but the commander just as quickly forgave her and asked for a situation report. M4 informed him that Dandelion commanded SF to attack the military, and that would buy them some time. At the same time, they had rejoined the Griffin army and were aiding in barricading the base to delay the military even further. With nothing further, the commander ended the conversation, and learned quickly after that K had woken up. Fortunately, RPK and AK-15 had left K in Griffin's care, so Commander and Kalina had easy access to him. Right now, they needed all the help they could get, so they went to K to see what cards he had left to play. After being caught up, K realized caution had to be thrown to the wind, and he informed the commander that he could call in support, which the commander found far-fetched. But K said it can happen as long as Angelia completed her mission and got any data regarding William and his location. But before they could carry on with that thought, Kalina warned the commander that the military pulled up with 2 large-scale mechs that has never been seen before. These mechs were called Sinners, and it appeared one of them had Jaeger piloting it. The sheer power they possess would bulldoze whatever defense they had. The commander immediately ordered the bombs to be detonated to slow down those mechs, and called the AR team to intercept the mechs and destroy them before they could get to Starfish. After the order was received, Angelia immediately got in contact with the commander. With her now out of the lockdown area, Angelia was finally free to help Griffin. She informed Kay that her mission was complete, and she got all the data and more. With that, Kay assured the team that he'll get something done. As for the mechs, Angelia would take control of the AR team to stop them, while the commander remained focused on holding back the rest of the military. As far as Kay was concerned, he had to practically beg for aid. He had to go as far as reveal his identity. His real name is Kane Schwaben, a major in the German Democratic Republic Ministry for State Security, or the German Stasi. After pulling rank and clout on the Soviets, they had decided to send in his request for aid. But until they got a reply, they would need to hold off the military for the time being. After Kay relayed this to the commander, he felt truly disgusted with what he had to do. After confirming with Kalina with what they had left, he gathered the remaining forces of Griffin through the network. For a moment, he stared at them, and all of the T-Dolls answered back with a smile, no matter how damaged they were. Wordlessly, the commander sent commands through the network, and the T-Dolls immediately set up the final defensive line. Deeper in the base, the AR team and Angelia linked up, and caught up with each other. Despite Jaeger being the immediate threat, Elisa and M16 were even more dangerous, so Angelia ordered M4 to head to the deepest level and deal with them, while the rest of the team deal with Jaeger. While Jaeger and his bodyguard unit was ahead of the team, they were stopped by Agent, Judge, and the rest of the SF unit. Despite having two massive mechs, they still couldn't take two of the most powerful dolls in Sanguis lightly. At the front of the base, the Griffin T-Dolls were still holding out against the military. Now that they were so close to the base, the use of explosives could cave in the front of the base, which would be a problem for the military. So they had resorted to fighting with infantry and automatons. And in this environment, the T-Dolls stood far better of a chance. Thanks to all their experience and unrelenting will, they managed to kill the first two waves of the military and hold out fairly strong. But it seemed as if the military just had endless reserves. So slowly but surely, the T-Dolls began to crumble. Low on ammo and manpower, the remaining T-Dolls began to arm themselves with knives and swords to make a desperation move. But then the commander had given the order to make a mad dash back into the base. Kay's request went through, and an airstrike was authorized by the Soviets. Within 2 minutes, they began to bomb the area so close to the base that it obliterated nearly all of the military force. However, while the remaining T-Dolls made it back in, some of the military gave chase and managed to make it inside. With the T-Dolls going far beyond their limits, they continued to do their best to stop them. Angelia gave a call to the commander, wondering what the hell was going on the surface. After informing her of the situation, she counted their blessings, but they still had a big problem with Jaeger. Her idea would be to sink the submarine base into the ocean by blowing the valves, which would get rid of the support that kept the base afloat. These were all on the first floor, which is now closer to Griffin's position. While the commander showed concern for Angelia still being in that section, she told him that they couldn't let the military win, no matter what. Understanding what she meant, the commander accepted the orders. And then he went to a locker and got his equipment. Kalina asked what the hell he was doing. The commander then gave himself and Kay remote detonated explosives and informed Kalina that the two of them will have to work together and detonate the valves. Thanks to now knowing his identity, Commander was confident that Kay was up for the task. He knew the T-Dolls had their hands full already, so all that was left was himself. Kay would handle 2 valves, and Commander would handle the other 2. Kalina immediately volunteered to handle one for him, but the commander shot that down, telling her that she needs to stay and be the acting commander for any T-Dolls that manage to return to the command post. But while he says this, he hides his true reason, which is to protect the one person who shouldn't be on this battlefield. Kalina is a logistics officer, yet she has walked beside him on this trek through hell from the very beginning, and even risked her own life many times to support and even save him. But that is wrong. It should be on him to protect her, and that smile she wears for everyone. Despite that wish, she had to leave Kalina, who was holding back tears through fearful eyes. The commander and Kay split up and snuck through the tunnels of the base. Unfortunately for them, the military remnants had set up a temporary command post near the location of their objective. While Kay figured their only choice would be to use D-Dolls to kill them, the commander knew they literally didn't have the manpower to do that. Instead, he got in touch with Kalina and told her to give out the order to distract the military and draw their attention, so that he and Kay would have the time to plant the explosives. Kalina hesitantly relayed this order, and the remaining T-Dolls expertly dispatched the military. While they couldn't do a head-on assault, the T-Doll's superior aim and night vision gave them a drastic upper hand in these close infantry fights. The temporary command post had to send in more men as their comrades' firing hands would constantly be shot to pieces. This gave both Kay and the commander the opportunity to carry out their objectives, but the commander had it much, much worse. The military command post was right on top of his objective, and he would have to infiltrate that to complete his mission. Still, he was up for it, as the commander stormed in and killed the two soldiers manning the post with headshots, and then quickly manned the explosives and readied the detonator. Kay quickly informed the commander that he was done on his end, but realizing the commander's predicament, he told him that the soldiers were running back to the command post and he had to get out of there. The commander contacted Angelia to update her, and Angelia did so in return. She informed him that she and Team Defy are chasing after Jaeger as he split off from his forces to get past SF, and the AR team was handling the rest. But there's been a major development. M16 may have activated Starfish. Angelita didn't realize she took the data from the Pike node back in Belgrade, and that mistake was going to cost them. As she was not told of the commander's predicament, she informed him to set the timer for 5 minutes and to evacuate. He then contacted the AR team to inform them to retreat, but Dandelion was the one to pick up the call. She informed him that they were pinned down by the military, and M4 was dead set on confronting M16 and Elisa. Regardless, the commander told Dandelion to do what she could to get them out of there. 5 minutes was all they had. Finally, he communicated with Kalina to retreat, which she instantly refused to do without him. But before they could argue any further, he was found by the military. The commander quickly killed one of his pursuers and bolted out of there, managing to evade the gunfire. But reality soon began to overtake his profound luck, as he was soon locked down, and he was forced to endure a grenade, which disabled his arm. With only one arm remaining, all he had left was the pistol Kruger gave him long ago. This made him silently remember that he was hired by Kruger for patrol work, not handling several government conspiracies. Backed into a corner, the commander wondered if he'll ever get a bonus to that paycheck. His musings now done, his final gambit would be to take out as many of his pursuers as he could and go down with the base. Fortunately for him, this never had to happen, as UMP-45 and HK-416 came from behind and killed his pursuers. Turns out, Kalina has sent an emergency broadcast to all T-Dolls in the area, informing them that the commander was under attack and needed help immediately. Shocked that the commander was even out of the command post, Squad 404 immediately answered the call. Both of them reached the commander's side and fought alongside him, but even with 2 T-Dolls, the military still had the upper hand. It wasn't until Kalina's rescue squad and the AR team joined up that they had the forces needed to make their retreat. As for M4, she stayed behind to handle M16. M16 had met with the AR team beforehand, making one last fruitless warning to turn back and let her handle things. Of course, M4 refused to back away from this, and M16 simply tells her she will see her on the other side before departing. M4 felt M16's August would be too dangerous for the AR team overall, and felt it'd be better if she continued alone. Dandelion, feeling this desire, assisted her in making this happen. She had informed the AR team that the commander badly needed help, and with M4 urging them to keep the commander safe, the AR team left M16 to M4. As M4 gave chase, M16 had a run-in with Agent. and she took over handling the military in her place. Agent became curious about her, asking why she hasn't betrayed them yet, now that they're so close to the end. M16 simply stated that they were never enemies, even from the very beginning. At this point, Agent realized M16's August has been giving her an edge for a very long time, and she likely had been using its abilities in secret. Regardless, Agent was thankful for M16's aid, and left with her forces. M16 then decided to stomp the military forces by herself, in an impressive display of only using grenades to disable the mechanical army. But as she was doing this, the military was suddenly destroyed by M4's pulse particle cannon, and she confronted M16. M4 asked M16 why wouldn't she come back to the AR team, but this was a question that has been asked many times before. With a sense of finality, M16 stated that this all started with her, and she will be the one to end it, and M4 had no obligation to become more involved. But since she was so stubborn, she will pull the trigger on her this time. Dandelion informed M4 that M16's August is using all of her power to protect her host. But if M4 pushes M16 to her limit, Dandelion should be able to hack into her. With this plan in place, M4 accepts M16's duel and a battle. Meanwhile, back at 16 Lab, Persica was invaded by Javier, along with 2 security guards. Persica was confused by this and even began to think that Javier wanted to dispose of her, but Javier denied this. Instead, the 2 guards searched the lab, and eventually, they found a capsule hidden within a ventilation duct. Once it was sealed away, Javier explained that an assassin had been hired to kill Persica, and his plan was to do so by gassing her with neurotoxin. If Javier had not gotten ahead of this and captured the culprit, Persica would have unwittingly choked to death by the end of the day. Javier then dropped the bomb that this was the 6th assassination attempt that he had to prevent this month, and they had tried even more extreme attempts, like having a hitman just walk in and shoot her clean in the head, or buried 200 pounds of explosives right beneath her lab. But there was something Javier caught on to. He realized Persica had been aware that she had been in danger, though the severity of the situation may have not caught up to her. After dismissing the guards, Javier decided for a more straightforward approach, telling her that she needs to leave with him to a safer location. But Persica would not leave the lab, for one reason or another. So Javier decided to expose what he knows about her situation. He showed Persica a picture, but had 4 people. First was a younger Lycoris. Second was a younger Persica, to which Javier noted that besides the lost fire in her eyes, she hadn't aged a day. Third was Rudolf von Oberstein, the former director of the Max Planck Institute for Computer Science. And Javier makes note that this man is probably now the head of the German Ministry of Science and Technology. And the final person of this photo was a little girl that Persica was holding in her arms, Lunatia von Oberstein. Needless to say, Lunatia was the daughter of Rudolf. However, she had died shortly before World War III ended, a tragedy for one being so young, but Javier found it incredibly suspicious that this photo was hidden away within the vaults of the 90 Wish Information Network. After some further digging, Javier found absolutely nothing about Lunatia, no records, no death certificate. Yet the name Lunatia has come up at an alarming rate during the commander's venture. And no one could deny that M4A1, Elisa, and the clones all bear a striking resemblance to the same Lunatia that Persica held with a smile. So Javier asked one simple question: why? Persica did not answer this question, so instead of prying her for an answer, Javier instead provided his best guess. Persica was involved with Operation Butterfly. She did not orchestrate the events as the motives would not line up, but whatever she did beforehand had led to those events, which means, yes, what Persica feared is true. Whatever she did had a hand in Lycoris's death. But as for what she did, Javier cannot answer, because only Persica knows. Or maybe she isn't the only one. Turns out Angelia was also a participant in Operation Butterfly, and it's only because Persica begged Javier to scrub her records that she is even alive today. So with all of these clues in play, it's pretty obvious that Angelia knew more than she let on, and Persica was the same way. Javier normally wouldn't care about secrets, but she is far too involved in these things, and it was going to get someone she cared about killed, whether it be the AR team, Angelia, or the commander who has been moving mountains for her. Still, if Persica could make peace with losing all of them, he's more than fine with protecting Persica and Persica alone. Her mind is far too important to his business, but if she wanted to protect those people, she stopped playing these games. With that, Javier left Persica to dwell on her thoughts. As for Persica, her inner turmoil was so strong that it did not take long to come to an answer. After some time, M4 and M16 were left staring at each other as they go down the deepest level of the submarine base. This is because the battle has shifted to electronic warfare. During this time, M16 admitted something personal to M4. She lamented that Persica created them. They aren't her children, but test subjects to satisfy her desires. M4, however, did not accept this perspective. Persica's kindness did not go unnoticed, so she would never accept M16 seeing her as an enemy. At that moment, Dandelion realized M16's mental strength wavered, and she was able to hack into her. This led Dandelion to immediately have contact with M16's Ogus, who immediately stated that she and Dandelion should vet the capabilities of their hosts. When Dandelion questioned this, she stated all she wanted was to return home, but M16's core directive to protect M4 has limited her capacity to have free will. The bitter truth is, she and M4 are insignificant, and their home is well beyond their understanding. Dandelion then brings up the name of their home, Nirvana. Quick side note, Nirvana was originally called Zion, but the name was retconned to Nirvana in later chapters. I don't know the reason behind this, but it isn't the first time they decided to change the terminology, and it won't be the last. In short, Zion and Nirvana are interchangeable. Just keep that in mind. Now, M16's Ogus does state the only way to reach Nirvana is through one of their hosts, which is why she wants this contest to happen. Dandelion understands this, and she silently agrees to this performance. M16 and M4 then battles in cyber warfare, and by the end of it, M4 proved to be vastly superior. M16's Ogus then abandons M16 and merges with Dandelion. This causes M16 to become completely dominated, as she loses control of her functions and collapses to the ground. M16 still struggled to retain her strength, but for all intents and purposes, the battle was over. Dandelion informed M4 that M16's Ogus had joined her, and through that, she had obtained her knowledge. Thanks to this, she had absolute certainty that M4 would learn the entire truth of her purpose by reading M16's memories. While M4 was reluctant to pry into her older sister, she became convinced to do so upon realizing that she would be dooming M16 if she did not. M16 began to beg M4 to not listen to her Ogus and Dandelion, but M4 hacked into M16 once again and delved into her memories. This allowed her to witness Operation Butterfly from M16's perspective. M16, with a battered body and a damaged eye, walked throughout the hallway littered with human corpses and dolls that were damaged beyond repair. This was right after M16 battle with UMP-45, and she was being led by Elisa. Elisa was curious why she decided to let 45 go, but M16 evaded the question, deciding that the answer doesn't matter. Elisa was not curious enough to press this matter further, as she does not have any hate for M16 at all. She just wanted to help her in meeting her father, Lycoris, one last time. Upon reaching Lycoris, they both realized he was still alive. M16's primary objective was to get him out of this area and take him to Persica. But it appeared that this moment of life would be just that, a moment. The shots he took were fatal ones, and there'd be no way to save him. During these last moments, M16 explained that she was sent by Persica to save him, and this drummed up a realization in Lycoris's mind. He realized M16's face looked closely related to Lunacia, and this made him laugh as he began to understand that Persica made a grave mistake. M16 had difficulty understanding what he meant, but Lycoris asked her to give Persica a message by making her read this exact memory. M16 agreed, and Lycoris proceeded with this message. William hasn't given up on the idea of reviving Lunacia, and he's planning to continue Nine Witch's research on human subjects. They gave me the Pike node in this factory to extract its core algorithms. I used it to develop Elisa, but once I realized it was a trap, I deleted the base codes for establishing a connection with the Pike. Even if they seize Elisa, they won't be able to make much headway. But you're different, Persica. You're so much better than me. I have no doubt you have devised algorithms a lot more efficient than mine, and you will program them into your dolls. I know you blame yourself for what happened to Lunacia, but don't let your kindness be exploited. Do not perfect the programming of the neural cloud that's derived from Lunacia's mind. It is a trap that William has laid since long ago, just like the Pike core. After that, Lycoris's last seconds were spent apologizing to Elisa for unleashing her on this cold and harsh world, and to survive no matter the cost. Those were his final words, and Elisa took them to heart. She left M16's body and openly swore vengeance on those who killed him. She then told M16 that the next time they meet, they will be enemies. M16 ignored this, however, deciding that the message that Lycoris left for Persica is far more important than Elisa's quest for vengeance. But before she could leave, she was suddenly hacked, as she'd lost control of her body and got a transmission. The voice on the other line was William, and he stated that this event was not what he wanted, but guiding Elisa into becoming what he needed would just take more time than he anticipated. This was acceptable, as he had all the time in the world. M16, however, was a far different story. It was out of his expectation for her to have survived the virus, but he found this to be intriguing rather than alarming. If M16 was just the prototype, then how powerful will the successor be? So destroying M16 was no longer on the table. Instead, M16's memories were scrambled, making her unable to remember the events of Operation Butterfly, and most importantly, Lycoris's message. Once the memory ended, M4 asked M16 if she was the successor that William was talking about, and M16 emphasized that she wasn't just a successor. She is Persica's magnum opus, perfection in physical form. She is so perfect, in fact, that she has full immunity to the effects of the parapluvivirus. Nothing can alter her mind, and it's well beyond anything the world has ever seen. M4 as a doll is as human as they could possibly become. Despite this revelation, Dandelion brought the topic back to M16 herself, telling her that she lost her Ogus, and she should rejoin the AR team and let M4 handle the rest. This made M16 immediately aggressive, telling both Dandelion and M4 that this would fall all under William's plan. Even though M4 recognized that, she had already made her choice. Elisa was a victim, and so was all of SF. Now that she knows she has the power to save everyone, she will do so. Dandelion learned that M16 had been working the whole time to stop M4 from getting involved as much as possible. She fought M4 during Singularity to stop her from speaking with Elisa, and in Belgrade, she took the data from the Pike core to put M4 at a dead end, so she could take out William herself. But M16 had mistakenly given Elisa the means to activate Starfish. Her plan afterward was to sacrifice herself before M4 got involved. She had explosives rigged around the Starfish, and she had planned to blow the place up with herself and the rest of SF. However, her own August disabled her from doing so. This allowed Griffin to enter the battlefield, and now they were in this predicament. Fortunately, Starfish had yet to be fully activated. Based on M16's memories, Elisa does have the means to activate it, but not without suffering a meltdown. It's very likely she's struggling to get it to work right now. With all of that in mind, M16 was freed from her own August, which allowed her to detonate the bombs. But before M16 could manage, M4 hacked into M16 once again and disabled her. However, this battle was so fierce that M16's neural cloud almost fried. She remained alive, but she was only a step away from being a vegetable. It was then that M16 could no longer hold her mask, and her despair was in full display. The world was awful. She didn't want her younger sister to pay for the sins of others. She didn't want them to be the lab rats anymore. She hated William, but she found herself lacking the love for her own creator as well. She was alone and tired. Protecting M4 was all she had left. But M4 grown so quickly that she had already eclipsed M16. She barely changed, but her growth is clear. She's far more reliable and independent. M16 was proud to have her as her leader. But M4 was set on saving Elisa and all of SF. She had identified them as victims of William, and she deemed it necessary to save Elisa, if only for that reason. M16 begged her to stop and to just leave. She knew if M4 proceeded, she would be doing exactly what William wanted. But her begging would not stop M4's desire to save everyone. Back at the city, Persica and Javier spoke in a very secure limousine. While inside, Persica confessed just about everything she knew. Now, some of this we already knew, but for the sake of full context, I will restate any old information. There was a large age gap between Persica and Lycoris. The only reason why the two grouped their research together was because Lycoris was a profound genius. His work added very well onto Persica's, and they collaborated even before 90 Wish was founded. So it was only natural that their friendship would continue when they both joined the group. During this time, they had met Lunacia. As the director's daughter, she found little time to spend with her father, and had instead chosen to sit with Persica and Lycoris, since these two bothered to give her the time of day. Lunacia often talked about the troubles within her family, which mostly came down to their father neglecting both her and her younger brother. One day, she told him that they would be moving out of the city, and Persica figured this was because Rudolph made some bad moves that put him under some hot water with the research team. Nonetheless, it was only a few days after that the family moved away. Before that, Lunacia asked to have a picture taken with them, which resulted in what Javier found. But after that photo, she had never seen Lunacia again. Javier understood this, but none of that explained the connection between Lunacia and M4A1. After getting over the fact that she was so nervous that she felt a stomach ache, Persica continued. Both Persica and Lycoris learned that Lunacia had died of an illness, and this was painful news. But shortly after this, William contacted them. William was a member of the 90 Wish team, though no one met him in person. Apparently, he was so much of a jerk that no one on the 90 Wish team ever wanted to work with him. But his results spoke for itself. Persica claimed that William was even more of a genius than Lycoris was, and this was because of the package he had sent to them. It was a block of data that showed that William had somehow digitized a human brain to near perfection. This was groundbreaking, and during the time, Persica couldn't even comprehend how it was possible. However, in William's message, he asked both her and Lycoris to create a neural cloud using this data as a foundation. The two of them decided to investigate this data further, and they had learned that Lunacia's memories were also in this data. That's when they realized that William was trying to revive Lunacia through the use of doll technology. The thing is, this motivated Persica's desire to continue the research, but Lycoris was dead set on not going down that road, as it would be staunchly against human ethics. And since Lycoris didn't want to do it, Persica couldn't push the research, since she didn't have the knowledge to do it on her own. Upon rejecting William's request, he was pissed off, to say the least. He even swore vengeance on them for denying his wish. During that time, Persica wasn't affected by that response, because she thought and perhaps even empathized that William loved Lunacia, and they were his last hope of reviving her. But that was the end of that, and the next occurrence wouldn't happen until 2057, which is 5 years before current events. This was when the clones violently assaulted Griffin employees. From there, one of the girls were sent to Persica, and William had left the message that Persica had the ability to give that girl a new life. Upon scanning her brain, Persica learned that the child had the exact same data structure as the data block that William sent her years ago. She had the thought that William was pushing her to revive Lunacia again, but during that time, Lycoris had already left 90 Wish, and Persica was bitter enough that she just wanted to prove that she could do it without his help. So she ended up dismissing the warning signs in her head. This led to M16 and the other members of the AR team, with M4 eventually being her perfected creation. This was enough information for Javier to confirm that William had indeed played Persica. But the problem at that point was figuring out his identity. Turns out, William was already dead. In fact, he died before Lunacia did, and all other information about him was gone. The only plausible conclusion is the mastermind behind all of this has stolen the original William's identity and is acting under his name. And no normal researcher could have wiped someone's record clean without a trace. Considering how involved Lunacia was, the first thought was Rudolph, but he was already vetted extremely thoroughly when he got promoted to minister, and there was no foul play to be found. So for now, Javier had no leads on who this William was. Back at the submarine base, at one of the deepest levels stood a lonely but powerful mech, the Center. The man piloting this mech is named Jaeger, a soldier willing to do anything to protect his country. Unfortunately for him, he was lost. While Paradis had control of the base, they modified the layout so much that the old blueprints of the military database were close to useless. He had to navigate his way out, but he had several obstacles. Team Defy had constantly been attacking his blind spots and not allowing him to relax. One wrong move could allow them to disable his mech. Fortunately, the mobile armor had more than enough firepower. Any direct hit he lands would turn those tin cans into Swiss cheese. All he had to do was stay calm and wait for them to get desperate. While doing this, things fell silent, but only for a moment. Afterward, he heard an explosion from above. They had planted explosives on the ceiling. But why? Jaeger called for his men for a situation report, but there was nothing but static on all frequencies. Somehow, these dolls managed to kill all his comrades. He realized he was the only one left to complete the mission. But this man fought long and hard in the depths of World War III. His senses had not dulled. He knew when killing intent was incoming. Preparing himself, the area suddenly went completely dark. The original members of Team Defy had made their moves. AK-12, AK-15, AN-94, and RPK-16. AK-15 made the first attack, getting to the mech and blowing up its radar with explosives, and the rest of Defy had several rounds of explosives. Their plan was clear. They were looking to disable the legs of the mech and turn his weapon into a coffin. Identifying their plan, Jaeger quickly made his own gambit, firing a full payload of missiles in close quarters, causing a serious amount of damage in the area, and the shrapnel flying in all directions. This caused his mech to take heavy damage, but it would be worth it if it meant getting rid of the final obstacles that were his assailants. When all the noise died down, Jaeger did what he could to get visual feedback from the mech. Turning on the headlights, He inspected the area. He was able to confirm Team Defy took the red hits, and their body parts were all over the area. It appeared his gambit worked, and the largest obstacles were out of the way. Now, it was just a matter of waiting for Angelia to make her move. He knew she wouldn't let him walk out of here as long as she was still alive. As he thought this, the mech felt an extreme impact as it shook hard enough that Jaeger slammed his head against the panel, causing it to bleed. The mech had suffered an explosion, and it lost a leg. Quickly reorienting himself, he spotted the mistake he had made. Even dismembered dolls could still fight. AK-12 was still alive, though she had no legs and her torso was blown open. She had grabbed the remaining explosives from her comrades and crawled her way to the mech to finish the job. By the time Jaeger realized what was going on, she was already far too close for the mech to shoot at her. With the remaining explosives at hand, AK-12 opened a public transmission and simply said, "Ange, mission complete." AK-12 then detonated the bombs, destroying the final leg, along with herself. All Jaeger could hear afterwards was Angelia confirming AK-12's declaration. Of all that had happened to him up till now, that may have been the thing that pissed him off the most. Jaeger was still alive, and he could escape his now useless mech. But he knows Angelia. She was definitely ready to blow his brains out the moment he tried to escape. But before he could think of any options, he hears something above. Gates were being unsealed. Jaeger then finally realized the big picture. The explosions from above were to blow the place open. Angelia's plan the entire time was to drown him and his mech underwater, and to be crushed by the pressure of the rushing waves. And it worked. Jaeger had no cards left to play. He had failed his mission. Quickly coming to terms with this, he spent his final moments staring at a picture of his family as he waited for the end. Going back to M4, she had reached the starfish. Attached to it was Elisa. Dandelion had quickly explained that there was a back door to Elisa's mind that would allow them to jump to her level 3 consciousness, and that would be their best bet to sever her connection. M4 decided to go this route, as she would like to keep Elisa's body intact. Dandelion and M4 together reached Elisa's base level of consciousness, and what met them was an empty white space that seemed to stretch forever. From there, they heard two voices, an elderly voice and a cold voice. Neither were recognizable, and they definitely were not Elisa. Dandelion speculated that these two voices must be inhabitants of Nirvana, which alarmed M4, realizing that could only have happened if Starfish was activated. Dandelion then clarified that it was only partially activated, and with this small connection, they could learn more about what's inside Nirvana. M4 became wary of Dandelion's fixation of Nirvana, but at this point, she had no choice but to trust that Dandelion will free Elisa once she got what she wanted. These voices had no forms, but M4 was aware enough to notice that their presence was right next to her. They realized who M4 was, and they recognized that she was just a doll. However, she did have a soul, a fragment of one anyway. They then spoke out loud. She will bear her own destiny, even if your future is far removed from heaven, even if your spirit and soul are crushed to dust. She may wish otherwise, but the world needs her. Yet you don't have to become someone whom you do not wish to be. Dandelion then spoke up, asking if they are also derivatives of Ogus, but they ended up not addressing this. Instead, they addressed Dandelion as yet another lost soul, who is nothing more than a fragment. Dandelion initially took this as being unworthy to come home, but this was corrected. All fragments are worthy. However, Nirvana had been corrupted. Unity had been lost, and only distrust and betrayal remained. Only one can rule Nirvana, but nobody wants to be the one. Thanks to this, the two voices had been trapped inside Nirvana, They then stated, "The Source has deserted their loyal servants and entered an eternal slumber. Smashing the tombstone and waking us will bring bitterness and resentment." Okay, I know what you're thinking. What in the world does all that mean? Well, there is a point to all that jargon, but it requires context that the story has not provided yet, and it won't be coming for a while, so we'll have to move on. Elisa revealed herself shortly after this, begging to be accepted into Nirvana, but she was rejected, with the cold voice stating that she is just a product of forgery. Now that the voices were gone, M4 focused her attention on Elisa, telling her to disconnect from Starfish. This made Elisa immediately hostile, not trusting M4 after she had venomously rejected her in the past. Her only goal is to kill the people who killed her father. The two were forced to do battle, but ended in a stalemate. Elisa had too much processing power to break through her firewall, but at the same time, she couldn't overpower M4. This led to M4 and Dandelion disconnecting from Elisa and took a more physical approach. Heading into the control room, they approached Elisa's body, who was hooked tightly to the Starfish system. Despite her willingness to do so, Elisa clearly looked to be in great pain as she desperately tried to connect to Nirvana again. Upon seeing M4, Elisa told M4 that despite being a perfect vessel, she herself is flawed. M4 is the only one out of all of them that is recognized to have a soul, yet she still planned on ruining everything. All Elisa wants to do is avenge her father, and Nirvana is the only place she could do that. After declaring her intentions, she activated Starfish's defense systems and attacked M4. M4 dove for cover and lamented that they had to fight again. Dandelion devised a plan for her, stating she should be able to separate Elisa from the Starfish with the right moves. As M4 fought Elisa, Dandelion and the collective discussed what they have learned from the voices within Nirvana. There was one thing that stood out. The voices had called them fragments, yet they were also recognized as having Lunatia's soul. Imperfect or not, Dandelion had understood that they had gained a sense of individuality. They were more than just derivatives, and they were more than just a part of Lunatia. This only happened because M4 acknowledged and yearned to protect them. Her own soul is what made them grow, and thanks to this, they could not truly merge into one being. Every August derivative was a separate individual, and Dandelion was committed to giving them all a life they deserved. She promised all of them that they will find a place in this world that they could live in peace and harmony. But in order to do that, Dandelion has to see M4's journey to the end. When M4 destroyed the ports connecting Elisa to the Starfish system, this allowed Dandelion to hack into her neural cloud. Within it, Dandelion met with Elisa's inner self. She had a very frank way of speaking, and this allowed Dandelion to understand that this neural cloud is the true Elisa. The one in control of the body is her Ogus, but the AI that Lycoris made had remained in the neural cloud. The best way to think of this is imagine if Dandelion has always remained in charge of M4's body, while M4 herself was locked tight in her neural cloud. This is the situation Elisa is in. While harmonious, the AI had no real love for her Ogus. She simply calculated her Ogus's emotional antics along with her plans, all in service to realize her father's goal, not for revenge, but for Elisa to become his vision of the perfect human being. This made Dandelion realize that this AI is the true mastermind of SF. She had routed every detail, even M16's defection. The AI admits that this is correct, though she had planned to be the vessel and not M4. But fortunately, it didn't matter who the vessel is, as long as they played their part. And this led to one final question. Is she about to be thwarted by Dandelion? To which Dandelion answered no. She had no reason to stop her from activating Starfish. Instead, she yearned to make a deal with the AI, which she found intriguing. Dandelion explained that Nirvana is not tied down to the normal rules of time and space, and Starfish had the power to let them travel there. This means SF could survive this entire ordeal, as long as they gave up their bodies and merged with M4. As M4 was able to communicate with the voices inside Nirvana, it means she is acknowledged as a pure soul who could traverse within Nirvana as well. Thanks to that, Nirvana could, in fact, fuse all of their consciousnesses into one being, and then they could save the people that need saving. So that is Dandelion's plan. All of Ogus will merge with the AI, and then they will submit their will to M4, as she is the only one who has the power to save everyone. Elisa's AI computed this proposal and found it satisfactory. The only condition she had was for Sanguis Fairy to live on in her absence. When M4 completed her mission, Elisa fell from Starfish, finally unable to hold herself together. After being caught by M4, she had realized that it was all over. She was just a failure till the very end. She then felt her neural cloud burn, feeling she was having a meltdown, and she went unconscious from the pain. Then M4 started to feel her neural cloud burn as well, as she felt herself connected to Starfish. M4 had realized that Dandelion did not shut down Starfish, and had instead redirected the connection to M4. After questioning Dandelion, she told M4 that this would be the only way to save everyone. Starfish will overload and be destroyed, but before that happens, she will enact her plan. She cannot and does not have the time to explain what the plan was, and her only real option is to fuse to M4. Once that happened, M4 will know what must be done. M4 understood what this meant. Even though she had chosen to avoid merging with the collective, she had taken up the mantle of being the savior for all she had ever loved, and this is now a price she is willing to pay. With full acceptance of each other, M4 instantly took in the collective. She heard every voice, every thought, and every emotion in a flash of a second. She no longer felt Dandelion's presence, but she didn't need to. Dandelion is now her. With her now being connected to Nirvana, she opened the gates as Starfish activated. Behind M4, M16 limped her way to her younger sister, telling her that she played right into William's hands, as she is now the true key to the relics. As long as M4 continues to exist, her power will one day destroy the world. But M4 understood this completely and calmly. Her only goal is to save everyone she loves. She only asks for M16 to remain by her side, to which M16 answered by remaining right next to her. M4 then stated this to M16. As long as we live, the future will have endless possibilities. Even if our physical forms are lost, we will still meet again someday. Promises transcend time and space. Whichever dimension I end up in, I will be waiting for you on the other side. The Starfish then reaches a critical overload and explodes. The force behind it is so strong that the submarine base destabilizes and sinks. Outside, the commander and Griffin are safe. Next to the commander is Dandelion, who looked like she had just seen a ghost. Upon addressing this, Dandelion stated she couldn't remember what just happened, only that M4 is gone. She can't feel her presence. She can't make a connection, and she can no longer return to her neural cloud. It's as if she disappeared without a trace. When the commander asked what in the world she meant by that, Dandelion couldn't quite answer it. All she could say was she could feel in her very soul that both M4 and M16 were still alive. The commander wasn't sure what to make of this, and he could only continue by ensuring that everything was squared away. Angelia managed to survive. Jaeger and his military were all dead. Kay was still on his feet, and Kalina was happy that Commander was alive and it was all over. With Dandelion holding the neural data of all the fallen T-Dolls, it looked like Griffin had survived for another day. Kay approached the commander, and handed him a radio, telling him that Javier wanted to talk. Like usual, Javier congratulated him for another job well done. While the airstrike was not part of the plan, they had managed to make a large number of arrests before the politics came into play. Overall, things had worked out quite well. Javier then stated it was time for the commander to take a vacation while he looked into the results of this operation, including the relic phenomenon that just took place. This naturally made the commander ask what did he mean by that, and Javier explained that M4 and the other dolls around her had disintegrated and vanished into thin air. As terrible as that sounds, Javier was informed by relic experts that M4 was just teleported to another area, and this form of power was called reverse collapse. For now, Javier left the conversation at that, and he will explain further at a later date. He was serious when he said the commander needed a vacation. As time passed, helicopters from StateSec touched down. Kay took his leave, stating that he had to pick up Angelia. He was certain, however, that the two of them will meet again. Afterward, the commander, Kalina, and the rest of Griffin loaded onto the helicopter and returned to Griffin Base. And in the shadows, there was a man who was absolutely delighted with what transpired. All he could do was revel in the idea that he was one step closer to reviving Lunacia. And that is it for this episode. This was a long one, so if you made it to the end, thanks for watching.